So you've set objectives and you've set key results. Let's get executing. Hang on, not so fast, not so fast. A goal without a plan is just a dream, and that applies to OKRs as much as any other kind of goal. So let's make these OKRs reality by creating a plan. Now, if you don't plan, then each week is kind of like Groundhog Day. Maybe you'd have a weekly check-in and review the OKRs and the numbers and so on, but when it comes to deciding what to do next, you're starting from scratch each week, and you've got to figure out, well, what were we doing and what did we think we were going to do, and what do we change? And then assessing that change is really hard. The thing is, most people struggle with planning because of two main reasons. Firstly, they're afraid that if they write a plan, they'll be unable to change it and they won't be agile, they won't be able to adapt. And secondly, they think planning involves a lot of work. And we know that no plan survives first contact with reality, right? So why bother wasting all that effort? Now, both of these reasons come from the same underlying problem. It's what they think the plan is for. It's because they see the plan as a detailed blueprint to be followed, and rather than an outline that becomes a basis for change. So I'm going to help you solve these problems right now and help you make simple plans that are designed for change with a tool that I call the one-page plan, so you can get into the planning habit. And I call it the planning habit because it's not just a step to take at the beginning, it's a habit to form that will continue to pay dividends. And here's how the planning habit works. While you're finalizing your OKRs, you write a draft plan, keeping it to 1, maybe 2 or 3 at the most pages. You share this plan with your team, your dependencies, your peers, your management, and so on, and integrate their feedback to improve the plan. So the reason you're integrating this feedback is partially to make sure that they're familiar with it, and also to make sure that they support it and understand it, so that when you're changing it, they're part of your team that can help you change it. But you've done some work on the plan, you've improved the plan a little bit, you've got some confidence about this plan, and now you can finalize the OKRs. Right now, finalizing the OKRs means specifically things like when you write, increase the metric from X to Y, you might fill in the X's and Y's because now you have a plan. Now, if you've already filled the X's and Y's in and you haven't got the plan, you kind of need to make sure you have a plan that can feasibly get the metric from X to Y, right? That's part of the purpose of this plan. So now when you're executing, get started executing once you've done this, you don't have to have a perfected plan. But when you're executing, you're using the plan not as a blueprint to be followed, but as a basis for change. You use it every weekly meeting, not every day to say, what are we doing now? Let's look at the plan. But using it at least every weekly meeting, whether it's with your team or your manager, to say where you're up to, what you've learned, and then you change the plan based on what you've learned this week and what's happened. Right? And the discussion that you have in this meeting is about changing the plan, because you have written down a plan, you have some idea of what you were going to do and what you're going to do differently. You now can assess the change. You can assess, if we made this change, what else needs to change, and so on. Now, the act of having this plan in the first place means that you've worked with your dependencies and stakeholders and so on, means that you've highlighted quite a lot of the issues that will come up. So you should have less change because of that in the first place, but change will still happen. And when you're changing things, the people you work with, they're already familiar with the plan, and it's short so that they can be familiar with it. If you have a 20-page plan, no one's going to remember it, no one's going to be familiar with it, they're not even going to read it, let alone provide useful feedback. But they are familiar with it because it's short, you've reviewed it with them already, so in the meeting you can say, I'm planning to change my plan like this. I'm planning to change my plan. I'm going to change my plan like this, right? Or this is what I'd like to change about my plan. And they can provide useful feedback on the changes, they can improve what you're doing and so on. And then they remain familiar with it as you go on because they see the changes every week and you become co-owners of the plan together. And this creates real collaboration. And what we're not doing, and this is the thing to not do, is to don't use the plan as the accountability tool. We're not executing to the plan. We're not trying to predict all the things that might happen, what we might learn and what might go well or badly at the start of the year or start of the quarter, and then try to deliver everything we said. We're trying to deliver what's in the objective and the key result, and the plan is a tool to do so, and the plan is dynamic. Now, by the way, you might have heard in some OKR discussions, people talk about objectives, key results, and initiatives. A plan is kind of like the initiatives, but with a bit more detail around it. And I think it's really important to have that detail. Otherwise, you just have a list of initiatives and you don't really have the thinking that goes behind there, like where are the resources for that and so on. But if you just want to use a list of initiatives as a start, that's great. So what we are doing with this plan, we're not using it as a blueprint, but what we are doing is ensuring that we're having high-value conversations about the most important challenges we're facing to meet our objectives and deliver our key results. And that's the purpose of the plan, to have those conversations and to make sure we're having those conversations in an informed way. And this helps keep us moving and gets attention on what's important rather than being distracted in these meetings with boring updates, backpatting and explaining the same thing repeatedly. But we're getting into the execution cadence, which is the next video a bit here, and that's because the planning habit is a core part of execution. But first you have to start with writing the plan itself. So in the next video, we'll go over how to write the plan.